Hey everybody, welcome to my new video series, How I Built the Craziest Gym Ever. This series will include several episodes carefully explaining each piece of equipment I've built in my home gym. I'll be sure to cover things like a list of materials used for each machine, a basic cut list, the dimensions of each machine, and general instruction on how to assemble each piece of equipment. I'll also be adding what tools were used, how much time and cost, as well as discussing future gym equipment projects. If you enjoy this video and want to support future content, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below. So without further delay, let's get to this episode's project. What's going on, everyone? We made it to episode 10 of the series, and today we're going to go over how to build yourself a cheap but quality arm wrestling table using a few simple materials found at Home Depot. Arm wrestling tables are probably the most important piece of equipment for any aspiring arm wrestler to attain, but can also be a financial burden to some who can't afford one brand new. This table is sturdy, affordable, easy to make, and best of all, offers the opportunity to both new and experienced pullers to pursue their arm wrestling aspirations. Here are the steps needed to build this arm wrestling table. Step 1. Gather materials. In an effort to keep costs down and to simplify the project as much as possible, I designed this table entirely out of 2x4 boards with the exception of the table pads and hand pegs. To be exact, you will need 11 2x4 boards and one 24-inch by 24-inch sheet of plywood. For the hardware, you will need 2 1-inch floor flanges, 2 1-inch by 6-inch plumber's pipe, also known as a nipple, 2 1-inch pipe caps, 8 2 1/2-inch bolts, 10 4-inch lag bolts, 1 box of 2 1/2-inch screws, and a handful of 3 1/2-inch screws. For the table pads, you will need 1 yard of vinyl fabric and 1 24-inch by 24-inch by 2-inch foam padding. Other optional materials may include paint and basic paint supplies, as you will see used in this project. For the tools, you will need 1 miter saw, 1 table saw, 1 power drill, a hammer, a staple gun, a hot glue gun, measuring tools, an X-Acto knife or scissors, and sanding equipment. Step 2. Complete cut list. Starting with the 2x4 boards first, make the following cuts. 8 cuts of 38 1/2 inches, 8 cuts of 38 inches, 4 cuts of 35 inches, 4 cuts of 26 inches, 2 cuts of 23 inches, 4 cuts of 16 inches, 4 cuts of 6 1/2 inches, and 8 cuts of 3 inches. For the plywood, make 2 cuts of 7 inches by 7 inches and 2 cuts of 2 inches by 12 inches. Step 3. Sand and paint each board. Probably the most underrated process for this project is how well you sand and prep each board for paint before the installation procedure. Take the time to sand each board carefully to eliminate rough patches in the wood and prevent future splinters from occurring. If you choose to have your table painted, now is the time to separate and paint each board accordingly. Step 4. Build legs and base. Take the 8 38 1/2-inch boards from the cut list and pair them together using 2 1/2-inch screws to make the 4 legs of the table. To build the base, take the 2 35-inch boards and pair them together the same way using 2 1/2-inch screws. Next, take the 2 26-inch boards from the cut list and join them at each end of the 35-inch boards using 3 1/2-inch screws. The last part of this step is to build the leg braces that secure the bottom of the legs in place. Take the 4 6 1/2-inch boards and the 8 3-inch boards from the cut list and join them together as shown using 2 1/2-inch screws to make a brace for each of the 4 legs. Step 5. Build table frame. Begin by taking 2 of the remaining 35-inch boards and the 2 remaining 26-inch boards from the cut list and join them together as shown to make the frame of the tabletop. Be sure the dimensions of the frame read exactly 38 inches by 26 inches. Now grab the 2 23-inch boards from the cut list and pair them together using 2 1/2-inch screws to make the table bracket. Insert the bracket directly in the middle of the frame and join the bracket to both sides of the frame using 3 1/2-inch screws. Take 2 of the 38-inch boards from the cut list and join them at each end of the frame as shown using 2 1/2-inch screws. Step 6. Assemble table. Start the assembly process by laying the base of the table down on the ground. Place the 4 legs into position as seen here, then take the 4 leg braces and place them into position around each leg. Join each brace and leg to the base of the table using 2 1/2-inch screws. Next, place the table frame on top of the 4 legs and force the legs to position into each corner of the table frame. Take the 4 16-inch boards from the cut list and position them in between each leg as shown and secure them to the table frame using 2 1/2-inch screws. Now grab the remaining 6 38-inch boards and place them on top of the table frame. Fill the top of the table with boards 1 through 6 and leave boards 7 and 8 to be trimmed down from 3 1/2 inches to 2 1/2 inches using a table saw. Once boards 7 and 8 are cut, place them into the center of the table and join the tabletop to the frame using 2 1/2-inch screws. Check to see how sturdy the table is and make adjustments as needed. Once all the adjustments are done, install the 10 4-inch lag bolts into the table. Pre-drill and install the first 4 lag bolts into the table frame and legs as seen. Then flip the table on its side and add the remaining 6 lag bolts to the base and lower legs of the table. Step 7. Complete tabletop. Now that the table is built, it's time to complete the tabletop. Start by measuring 13 inches to both sides of the table and install both 1-inch flanges from the hardware list using 3 1/2-inch screws. Take both 6-inch pipes and screw them firmly into the flange, then screw both 1-inch pipe caps into the top of the pipe to complete the table pegs. Now take the 2 7-inch by 7-inch plywood cuts and drill 2 holes into each cut, measuring 1 inch from the top and bottom and 3 1/2 inches from the outer edges. Then take the 2-inch by 12-inch plywood cuts and repeat the process, drilling holes 1 inch from the top and bottom and 1 inch from either side of the cut. Once you finish drilling the holes, place each piece into position so you may use the holes on the plywood as a stencil to mark where to drill into the tabletop. Place the elbow pad 13 1/2 inches from one edge of the table, 17 1/2 inches from the other, and 2 inches from the front of the table. Use a pencil to mark where to drill and repeat the process for the other side. Position the 12-inch cuts for the pin pads angled on the table to measure 3 1/4 inches from the closest corner of the pad to the competitor's edge of the table and 5 1/4 inches from the edge of the table to the closest corner of the pin pad. Be sure to reverse the process and mark both the left and right sides of the pad positions. Once all 12 holes are marked, use a power drill to carefully drill each hole into the tabletop. Take the 8 2 1/2-inch bolts from the hardware list and install 2 bolts into each piece of plywood. Tighten down all the bolts as snug as possible and check to see how each piece fits into the table. Step 8. Complete table pads. The final step of this project is to complete the table pads. Start by using the 7x7 plywood to trace 2 patterns into the foam padding. Cut out the foam padding using a pair of sharp scissors and place the foam on top of the 7x7 plywood. Use a few strips of duct tape to wrap around the foam padding and plywood to help keep it in place during the vinyl wrapping process. Repeat this process for both elbow pads. For the pin pads, use a marker to trace out 2 3 3/4 inch by 12-inch patterns into the remaining foam padding. Once again, use scissors to cut out both patterns, place them on top of the 2-inch by 12-inch plywood, and use duct tape to hold the foam in place as shown. Now it's time to wrap each pad using the vinyl fabric. For the elbow pads, cut out a 14-inch by 14-inch pattern from the vinyl fabric. Lay the elbow pads directly in the middle of the pattern. Begin wrapping the elbow pads by stretching 2 opposing sides of the fabric and joining it to the plywood using a staple gun. Proceed with folding and wrapping the remaining sides of the elbow pads as if wrapping a gift. Again, use a staple gun to secure the fabric tightly to the plywood and use an X-Acto knife to trim any excess fabric. Wrapping the pin pads will be identical to wrapping the elbow pads. Cut out 2 patterns from the vinyl fabric measuring 14 inches by 9 1/2 inches. Place the pin pad directly in the middle of the pattern and wrap the 2 opposing ends of the fabric around the pad and join it to the plywood using a staple gun. Take each end of the pin pad and carefully fold the fabric one end at a time and use a hot glue gun to hold and secure the folds in place. Be sure to use plenty of glue in between each fold and use an X-Acto knife to trim away any excess material. Once the hot glue cools, the final part of this project is to ensure that each table pad fits into its proper position and can easily be adjusted from right side to left side arm wrestling positions without friction. A quick tip that will help accommodate the table pads is to insert a 3/8 inch flange bushing into each of the 12 holes on the tabletop. This will allow the table pads to slide smoothly in and out of position without hesitation. Although not an immediate necessity to help keep costs down, including these bushings later as an upgrade to your table can be a welcoming addition by simply widening each hole accordingly and tapping the bushings into a secure position with a hammer. Now for time and cost. This project will cost about $100 worth of materials at most hardware stores and will take around 8 to 10 hours total labor time to complete, depending on whether or not you decide to include prep and painting into your table. You have now successfully completed your homemade arm wrestling table. Be sure to tune in to future episodes as we continue the series, How I Built the Craziest Gym Ever.